A sword's blade is pressed against the throat of a trembling woman with light blonde hair. In a dimly lit bedroom, a silver-haired man in a black robe threatens the blonde woman. Sweating and terrified, the blonde woman wonders what is happening as her memory feels fractured. An authoritative voice demands to know if she heard him speaking through the darkness. The silver-haired man nicks the woman's chest with his blade, demanding she reveal her identity. Gripping the bedsheets in fear, the blonde woman realizes she is too terrified to even move. The silver-haired man's gaze intensifies as he repeats his question, his blue eyes showing no mercy. Noting the blood on her chest, the woman panics about her missing memories and her identity. A sense of sudden realization or shock strikes the woman as her vision begins to blur. The silver-haired man looms as a fading silhouette, his threatening presence lingering in her fading consciousness. A blonde infant cries while a black-haired baby sleeps peacefully beside it in their shared swaddle. Shifting to a nursery, the woman observes the chaotic scene and wonders where she has been taken. A sudden, sharp scream echoes through the room as a woman clutches her face in absolute despair. Surrounded by worried maids, the blonde woman weeps hysterically while seated in an ornate dressing room. A brown-haired man bursts through the door, frantically asking if the newborn baby arrived safely. A maid confirms the birth with a hesitant expression, clutching her hands together nervously. Assuming the baby is beautiful, the brown-haired man approaches the cradle with a look of eager expectation. Shocked by the black-haired infant, the parents label it ominous and demand it be discarded immediately. The brown-haired man suddenly stops the maid as she prepares to take the unwanted infant away. Horrified, the maid wonders how parents could plan to use their own child in such a way. Years later, a black-haired girl with striking pink eyes is seen living a life of quiet seclusion. A sudden splash sounds as maids drench the black-haired girl with a bucket of filthy water. The maids mock the girl, claiming the stench and filth perfectly match her unlucky black hair. A cheerful blonde girl named Iris runs toward her father while holding a brightly wrapped gift. The brown-haired man and blonde mother warmly greet Iris, warning her not to run too fast. As Iris hugs her father, the black-haired girl is forced to scrub the floors in the background. The black-haired girl watches the happy family from afar, her eyes filled with deep, silent sorrow. Scrubbing the carpet, the girl laments the cruel disparity in how she and Iris are treated. She questions if her miserable existence is solely due to the color of her black hair. A harsh slap rings out as the girl is struck across the face, causing her to flinch. The father berates the black-haired child, blaming her for Iris's minor injury, despite Iris standing safely behind. He spitefully declares that it should have been the black-haired girl who suffered the injury instead. The man strikes the girl again, his face twisted in rage as he vents his cruelty. Iris hides a malicious smile behind her hand while watching her sister being physically abused. Iris mocks the girl's wretched state as the protagonist realizes the full extent of this horror. A dark realization settles in as the narrator questions if this abuse has defined her entire life. The black-haired girl is summoned to stand before her seated family in a formal, oppressive study. Confusion fills the girl as she hears her father mention her taking the place of Lady Iris. Tapping a sealed letter, the father explains that the palace has requested a bride from their family. Sipping tea, Iris arrogantly tells the girl she should be grateful for the chance to live luxuriously. The father smirks, expressing his relief that this arrangement will finally secure the Bertrand family's future. The name of the family triggers a memory, making the girl wonder where she has heard it. She realizes the names match a novel she once read, while her father orders her to be useful. The mother clarifies that the girl will act as Iris's double in the novel's dangerous world. The girl inwardly worries that her distinct hair and eye color will immediately expose the deception. Looking downward, the black-haired girl contemplates the impossible situation her cruel family has forced upon her. The father reveals a small jewelry box containing a simple but glowing silver ring. As the girl puts on the ring, a magical shimmer transforms her black hair into vibrant gold. Now appearing blonde, the girl stares in silence at her hand, fully realizing her role as a substitute. The blonde woman and mother are stunned by the magical alteration of her appearance. Transformed into a blonde, the girl marvels at the golden color of her magical disguise. The green-eyed man proudly reveals he commissioned a master craftsman to create the artifact. As she slides the ring off her finger, a subtle magical shimmer begins to dissipate. Her hair reverts to its natural black color once the magical ring is fully removed. The man sternly commands her to keep the ring on at all times without exception. He leans in, warning her to never let anyone suspect she is merely a substitute. Standing in the grand study, the black-haired girl quietly submits to her father's cruel demands. A silver-haired man's blue eyes flash with cold fury as he demands an immediate response. Gripping her nightgown in terror, the girl faces the sharp edge of the man's sword. Fragments of a past life and a novel's plot swirl as she realizes her identity. She envisions the tragic fate of Arya, murdered on her wedding night after being exposed. The man threatens to execute her as a traitor if she continues her stubborn silence. He swings the heavy blade down as she desperately cries out for him to stop. The steel stops just as it draws a thin line of blood from her trembling throat. Magic ripples through her as the golden illusion fades, revealing her true black-haired form.
With the sword at her neck, she confesses her name and her role as a replacement.
The man's gaze remains unyielding as he watches the truth reveal itself before his eyes. She explains that she was sent to marry him in place of her twin sister. Silence hangs heavy in the air as the silver-haired man considers her shocking revelation. Terror fills her eyes as the cold metal of the sword stays pressed against her skin. She flinches and braces for the final blow as the man looms over her menacingly. He decides to delay her fate, stating that their conversation will resume the following day. A sudden, firm grasp on a lock of her hair draws her face closer to his. He stares intently at her natural dark hair as a flower petal drifts past them. Before turning to leave, he orders that someone be sent to treat her minor neck wound. He exits the bedroom with a final word about continuing their talk in the morning. A heavy, solid thud sounds as the door is firmly shut behind him, leaving her alone. Collapsing onto the bed, she gasps with relief at having survived the lethal confrontation tonight. A sharp, pained cry escapes her as she touches the small, bloody cut on her neck. Looking up with pink eyes, she reflects on barely escaping the worst possible outcome tonight. She gazes toward the window, wishing the morning light would wake her from this nightmare. Dawn breaks over the majestic, sprawling towers of the palace, signaling a new day. Waking up, her eyes show the weight of a long, restless night filled with terror. A wave of realization hits her as she confirms her current life is not a dream. She steps out of the bed, her bare feet meeting the floor in the morning sun. Moving toward the vanity, she prepares to face the mirror and her own true reflection. The mirror reveals her black-haired appearance and the drying blood on her pale back. Exhausted, she falls into a plush chair, feeling the crushing weight of her impossible situation. Her eyes fall upon a decorative jewelry box which features a prominent and familiar crest. She recognizes the national crest from the novel world and wonders how she arrived here. A dark thought enters her mind as she questions if she died in her world. She struggles to piece together her fragmented memories from before her arrival in this body. Memories of systematic abuse and being used by others play like a tragic film reel. Surrounded by falling rose petals, she looks down, feeling the sorrow of a broken heart. From across the room, she contemplates the very real danger of being killed soon. Looking up with newfound resolve, she vows to prove that her life has inherent value. Her thoughts are interrupted by a quick, sharp knock sounding from the bedroom door. Shimmering with gold, her hair transforms as she quickly responds to the knock at the door. A brown-haired maid named Lisa introduces herself as the girl's new personal lady-in-waiting. Arya accepts Lisa's assistance, acknowledging her role as she places herself in the maid's care. Lisa politely advises that such extreme formality is unnecessary between a queen and her lady-in-waiting. Acknowledging the request, Arya resolves to act naturally while privately worrying about the injury on her neck. Lisa prepares medical supplies on the vanity, intending to treat the wound and finish Arya's morning preparations. While brushing hair, Lisa mentions the scheduled meeting in Fenrir's office, causing Arya to flinch in shock. A sense of dread washes over Arya as she timidly agrees to follow the maid's planned escort. Arya remembers the silver-haired man's promise to listen and grips her dress, determined to pull herself together. Clenching her hands tightly, the girl focuses on her role as Arya to strengthen her resolve. Facing away from the mirror, she reaffirms her commitment to protecting her own life and the sisters. Dressed in an elegant lavender gown, Arya stands resolutely among white flowers, ready to face her fate.
A rhythmic tap of footsteps sounds in the grand hallway as Lisa leads Arya toward the office.
Walking toward the meeting, Arya admits her deep fear while a dark image of Fenrir haunts her. Memories of the sword at her throat return, making her wonder if he will draw steel again. A soft crunch sounds as she grips her skirt, struggling against the overwhelming urge to flee now. Determined to find happiness, Arya steels herself, knowing that moving forward is her only path to survival. Lisa reaches the massive double doors and formally directs the queen consort toward the impending, dangerous confrontation. A quick, firm knock sounds as Lisa announces she has brought the queen consort to the emperor. The heavy doors groan open as a cold, authoritative voice from within grants them permission to enter. The office stands open, revealing a sun-drenched room where the silver-haired man waits in heavy, silent anticipation. Arya enters the room, finding Fenrir seated at his desk, observing her with an unreadable and calm expression. Addressing her by name, Fenrir acknowledges the arrival of Arya Bertrand, heightening the tension in the room. His blue eyes narrow as he commands the girl to reveal every secret she has been hiding. Leaning on his hand, the silver-haired man stares intensely and demands that she begin speaking immediately now. He continues his icy command, ordering her to disclose everything she knows without any further delay or hesitation. Standing before the desk, Arya feels the crushing weight of the man's sharp and icy presence looming. Overwhelmed by fear, Arya questions if telling the truth will save her or simply lead to execution. Fenrir grows impatient, asking how much longer she will wait before giving her a 3-second countdown. Panicking as he counts down, Arya blurts out her willingness to comply with his demands right away. Recalling her role, the girl resolves to be honest, knowing lies are useless against such a man. Taking a shallow breath, the girl opens her mouth to begin the story of her tragic past. Surrounded by white flowers, Arya prepares to reveal the secrets of the Bertrand family's long-standing deception. The scene shifts as the two sit on facing couches, the atmosphere thick with tension and dread. Starting her story, Arya reveals her origins as one of the twin daughters born to Marquis Bertrand. A dark notification appears, reflecting the sad truth that not a single person celebrated her birth. A sharp scrubbing sound rings out as a young girl's hands work tirelessly on a dark surface. Small and isolated, the black-haired girl is seen laboring alone in a vast, dark, and oppressive hallway. With dirt on her face, the child looks up with weary pink eyes, exhausted by chores. A sudden click sounds as a woman in a green dress enters, ordering to... The woman gasps and demands to know why the girl is loitering there, pointing an accusing finger. Falling hard onto the floor, the girl is berated by her mother for showing her unlucky hair. The Marquis swings his cane down, striking the child and asking how many times he must repeat. A sinister snicker follows the glint of golden scissors being brandished in front of the cowering child. Iris smiles maliciously while holding the blades, suggesting that her sister should just cut her hair. Snipping sounds fill the air as black hair falls while Iris sneers about how filthy it is. Laughing at the jagged result, Iris tells her sister that the ruined hair suits her perfectly well. The girl stares into the darkness with hollow eyes, her natural hair left in a messy ruin. A splash of water signals the start of another chore as the girl washes clothes alone. Exhaling a tired sigh, the child watches the bubbles on her hands, wishing for an end. Carrying a heavy wicker basket, the child walks through the garden to hang the laundry to dry. Other maids stand nearby, whispering and laughing cruelly as they watch the ostracized girl struggle alone. Arya trips over a cruel maid's foot, letting out a startled cry as her laundry basket slips. A heavy splash sounds as Arya lands in the mud, while the maid mocks her misfortune. Soaked and miserable, the black-haired girl looks down with exhaustion as water drips from her. Transitioning to a memory, a notification reveals that Iris is a candidate for the queen. In the grand study, the brown-haired Marquis presents an official letter with a red seal. The blonde Marquise panics, fearing the cruelty and tyrannical reputation of Emperor Fenrir. Crying out in distress, the woman insists she cannot bear to see her daughter unhappy. Marquise Bertrand smirks with a sinister glint, realizing this situation can be used for profit. Facing the cowering black-haired girl, the Marquis mockingly congratulates her for being useful at last. Arya's face remains shadowed and hollowed by the crushing reality of her family's dark intentions. Back in the present, golden-haired Arya concludes her story while the Emperor listens in silence. A silent tension hangs between them as Fenrir reflects on the Bertrand family's treasonous deception. Memories of Iris in luxury versus Arya's life of labor blur together in her mind. Fenrir leans back, noting that she is simply a stand-in for the intended bride. Looking up with emerald eyes, Arya waits anxiously for the man's response to her confession. A heavy silence follows as the contrast between Arya's current disguise and former self lingers. Fenrir's blue eyes remain icy and unreadable while he carefully considers his next move now. The Emperor's ornate uniform and deep red cravat catch the light in the quiet room. A sudden, sharp creak sounds as Fenrir opens the window to the bright morning light. Stepping out onto the stone balcony, the silver-haired man turns his back on the girl. He looks back over his shoulder with a calculating gaze, weighing the value of her. Visions of a happy Bertrand family and a wedding ring symbolize the fraud she represents. Fenrir remains stoic and silent, observing Arya from the balcony as the morning sun shines. Left alone on the blue couch, the girl feels small beneath the weight of his judgment. A firm, solid thud sounds as the Emperor shuts the glass doors and returns inside. Resuming the conversation, he deduces that a deeper scheme must be fueling her family's actions. He suddenly steps closer and tilts her face up, forcing her to meet his intense gaze. A quick, sharp grab sounds as he tilts her chin, catching her completely off guard now. Startled by his sudden touch, Arya looks up into his eyes with growing fear and confusion. He leans in close, warning that her true identity must be hidden from everyone but him. Arya's breath hitches as the man's hand stays firmly fixed on her pale, trembling face.
She stammeringly agrees to his demands while his proximity remains overwhelming and threatening. Fenrir adds a final condition, ordering her to act as Iris Blanchard until further notice. Gripping her lavender dress in terror, Arya realizes the complexity of the role she must play. He whispers her new name directly into her ear, sealing her fate as a permanent substitute. Swallowing her fear, the girl acknowledges his command and pledges to follow his specific instructions. Fenrir skeptically questions if a mere substitute can truly learn to behave like a proper queen. Arya falters, knowing she was never taught the etiquette required for a person of her status. Images of wine being poured and noble training contrast with her past life as a servant. Red rose petals fall across a dark surface, symbolizing the end of her previous hidden life. Panic sets in as she envisions being starved or imprisoned if she fails her new master. A grim image of a guillotine represents the worst possible outcome if her secret is revealed. A cold shiver runs down her spine as the reality of her deadly situation becomes clear. Fenrir watches her changing expressions with a mix of curiosity and persistent cold suspicion. A low, dull creak sounds as he leans back against the couch, observing her every flinch. Slumping back into the cushions, the Emperor lets out a long and weary sigh of frustration. He flatly announces that her first order of business will be to undergo a queen's education. Arya is left stunned and speechless by this sudden prospect of formal royal training lessons. She panics internally, recalling how she was always terrible at studying and focusing on difficult tasks. Fenrir notices her visible distress and asks if she is dissatisfied with his latest royal decree. Arya quickly denies any dissatisfaction to the Emperor while looking quite flustered and defensive. She reflects on the Emperor's comments regarding her expressions during their intense and dangerous meeting. Fenrir explains she will only attend mandatory royal ceremonies to maintain their complicated public charade. A sudden gasp sounds as Arya remains silent and visibly anxious about the coming trials. He warns she shouldn't relax, threatening consequences if her training results are found to be insufficient. Arya manages a nervous smile while sweating over the life or death pressure she faces in the palace. A sudden, sharp clatter sounds as Fenrir questions her about her family's instructions regarding their communication. Arya recalls her father's cruel instructions to observe the palace situation carefully before acting on anything. A sharp glare sound rings out as Fenrir expresses deep disdain for being underestimated by her family. He forbids her from contacting them, wanting to see how they choose to act without her. Arya bows her head and formally acknowledges the Emperor's strict command with a submissive response. She worries that her parents will punish her despite simply following the Emperor's explicit royal orders. A heavy, low creak sounds as the massive office doors finally begin to close shut. A firm thud sounds as Arya expresses relief at not being immediately executed after her confession. She reminds herself to remain vigilant despite this temporary and fragile reprieve from the Emperor's wrath. Arya's intensive education in royal etiquette and politics proves to be far more exhausting than imagined. Time passes in a blur as a notification reveals that a few weeks have since passed. A soft, quick tap sounds as she finally finishes another heavy stack of work for the day. Sitting at her desk, Arya feels completely drained by the weight of her endless royal responsibilities. A clear, bright ring sounds as she uses a golden bell to summon assistants to her office. A sudden, firm knock sounds at the door in response to her bell's chime for help. The aide offers to take the completed documents and handle all of the remaining processing work. He explains that he has summarized the most important items to simplify her final daily review. The man points out specific sections in the reports that require her immediate and focused attention. He requests that she carefully examine the papers for any necessary final corrections before they are sent. Arya looks up and thanks the aide for his thoughtfulness regarding her incredibly heavy daily workload. She suggests a tea break, and Lisa happily agrees to join her for some well-deserved refreshments. Fenrir walks through the palace while being briefed on the substitute queen's impressive academic progress. The aide reports that her ability to comprehend complex royal lessons is actually quite excellent and surprising. He further notes that she handles her assigned administrative duties with great efficiency and tireless dedication. The aide highlights her remarkable kindness and consideration toward all of the palace attendants and servants. Fenrir remains silent, his expression unreadable as he absorbs the positive reports about his new wife. The aide expresses concern that the girl is pushing herself far too hard given the circumstances. Arya cheerfully insists to Lisa that she is fine despite the massive and growing workload she faces. She declares that complaining about the difficulty would simply be a waste of her valuable time now. The silver-haired man observes her from a distance with a deeply pensive and quiet gaze. A rhythmic thud of footsteps sounds as Fenrir claims he is only giving her minimal tasks. The aide worries that her health will fail if she maintains this frantic and exhausting pace. Fenrir remains skeptical of her transformation while comparing her current self to her previous life. He recalls a memory of a girl who did nothing but cry in a state of isolation. He decides to wait and see how long she lasts before finally giving up on the role. The aide calls out to the emperor, who simply orders them to move on with their day. Fenrir looks back one last time at the girl who was successfully fooling everyone in the palace. A soft click of footsteps sounds as the scene shifts to a dark, quiet, and lavishly decorated room. A quick pop sounds as Iris reaches for a grape while lost in her own private thoughts. Iris sighs and admits that being confined to her room feels incredibly suffocating and boring. She wonders if her sister is managing, convinced Arya's gloomy personality won't ever truly change. Lounging in her chair, Iris maliciously wonders if Arya has already been executed by the Emperor. A wet squish sounds as Iris dismisses her sister's worth and demands a report on the situation. The blonde woman mockingly addresses her dear sister while surrounded by dark and thorny roses. The grand palace tower looms against the sky as Arya contemplates attending a diplomatic meeting.
Fenrir sits at his desk, observing that the blonde-haired girl appears quite startled by his suggestion.
He asks if she forgot her duties, prompting Arya to stammer a mention of the ambassador. The silver-haired emperor offers a brief and cold confirmation regarding the coming arrival of the guest. He explains her role in the greetings, and Arya gives a respectful and submissive verbal acknowledgement. Fenrir notes this is her first meeting and a chance to prove her royal education's worth. Looking intensely determined, Arya pledges to do her absolute best to fulfill her new royal duty. Internally, the girl screams for him to stop placing so much heavy pressure on her soul. She despairs that his constant expectations are only serving to make her feel much more nervous. Fenrir stands and mockingly compares her growing reputation to the pride of her distinguished Bertrand family. Arya forces a strained smile, telling the emperor that she is truly honored by his praise. A small, annoyed version of the girl fumes over the man's obviously sarcastic and biting compliments.
Fenrir curtly dismisses her from the room, and Arya accepts the command with a final bow.
Walking away, the girl excuses herself and prepares to leave the emperor's presence for the day. Arya reflects on the kingdom of Martell, certain she remembers its name from the original novel. Images of iron bars and advanced refining techniques represent Martell's status as a wealthy iron producer. As visions of steel weapons appear, Arya struggles to recall the kingdom's specific role in history. Turning back suddenly, the girl calls out to the emperor to ask a final, urgent question. A heavy silence follows as Fenrir looks up from his documents with an icy, unreadable stare. Surrounded by flowers, Arya asks for permission to attend the formal audience with the foreign ambassador. Fenrir expresses surprise at her request and demands to know the reason behind her sudden interest. She argues that Martell is an important ally and the ambassador should be treated with respect. A tense silence fills the room as Arya waits nervously for the Emperor's final, deciding word. Fenrir eventually yields, flatly stating he will have a seat prepared for her at the meeting. Brightening instantly, Arya expresses her sincere gratitude to the Emperor for granting her this new opportunity. He dismisses her once more, and she curtsies gracefully before making her final exit from his office. A soft click sounds as the doors close, leaving Fenrir alone with his own private thoughts. The Emperor sits in deep contemplation, weighing the implications of his new wife's strange, bold behavior. He examines a sealed letter, noting that the Blanchard kingdom has never been close to them. Fenrir observes that while Blanchard is a low priority, something about the current situation feels off. Back in her own office, Arya's aide offers to handle the remaining documents for her today. Lisa enters the room with a tray, announcing that the girls' afternoon tea has been prepared. Arya accepts the cup with a tired smile and thanks the maid for her attentive service. The girl's eyes light up as she notices the tea is remarkably sweet and quite delicious. Lisa explains she added extra sugar for energy, and Arya joyfully calls her a literal angel. Arya shudders at the thought of having tea with Fenrir, imagining him in a terrifying outfit. Despite the exhaustion, Arya admits to herself that she is actually starting to enjoy her work. She reflects on how this position allows her to hear the common people's genuine, honest voices. A warm smile crosses her face as she tells Lisa she is happy to be helping. The maid looks at the young queen with a kind and genuinely supportive expression of her own. Arya declares her intention to keep working hard for a bit longer to finish her tasks. Looking over the desk, Lisa gently advises the girl not to overexert herself during her studies. Arya pauses her work, her attention caught by a document featuring the Kingdom of Martell's crest. A sudden realization strikes her as she gazes at the paper with a look of growing shock. She remembers that in the novel's latter half, the Kingdom of Martell played a very dark role. Visions of fire and black flags represent a violent coup that devastated the Blanchard kingdom's peace. Images of steel weapons revealed that Martell's refined technology was the key to the war's preparations. Arya's expression turns grave as the weight of this forgotten knowledge begins to settle in her. A sharp rustle sounds as she grips the paper, wishing she could recall the finer details. She suddenly questions if her own family was actually the one who instigated the bloody coup. Sitting at her desk, Arya tries to recall the secondary characters from the novel's original plot. Frustration sets in as she realizes her memory of the finer story details is failing her. She envisions the novel's original main couple and the tragic scene of her own character's death. A soft, tired sigh escapes her as she feels the overwhelming pressure of her uncertain future. Deciding that worrying is useless, Arya focuses on how to successfully mediate relations with the Kingdom of Martell. With renewed determination, she commits herself to doing her absolute best in her role as the queen. A quiet transition occurs as the scene shifts through a backdrop of dark, blooming roses. In the solitude of his room, Fenrir sits in deep silence while contemplating the girl's recent actions. He recalls Arya's earlier argument about Martell's importance and her desire to foster a genuine diplomatic friendship. Gripping a glass, the Emperor remains suspicious that she might still be part of a larger conspiracy. A subtle, knowing smirk plays on his lips as he considers the potential of the coming meeting. He resolves to handle whatever consequences might arise from his decision to let her attend the audience. Holding his drink amidst dark flowers, Fenrir prepares to take drastic action if she shows any signs of betrayal. The formal meeting begins as the Emperor acknowledges the ambassador's proposal while Arya watches with quiet focus. The balding ambassador explains Martell's desire to use the Empire's magic technology to enhance their iron refining. He proudly boasts about his nation's expertise in crafting high-quality weapons and armor for the region. A heavy, expectant silence falls over the table as Fenrir and Arya exchange a momentary, unreadable look. Fenrir points out Martell's true intention to sell their refined steel to other nations once production increases. The ambassador confirms this plan, noting that the steel trade remains his kingdom's primary source of wealth. He compares the emperor to a mirror that reflects the true nature of whoever stands before him. Fenrir leans back, his expression sharpening as he analyzes the deeper meaning behind the man's cryptic words. The ambassador suggests that if the reflection seems distorted, it is merely revealing the observer's own heart. The emperor's eyes narrow with intensity as he processes the bold and philosophical nature of the man's challenge. The atmosphere in the grand meeting room turns chillingly cold as the diplomatic tension reaches a breaking point. Arya's face pales in terror as the emperor suddenly reaches for the hilt of his massive sword. Fenrir draws the blade, declaring that iron must be hammered to change shape, terrifying the visiting ambassador. Panicking, Arya lunges forward and begs the emperor to stop before he makes a grave diplomatic error. She tightly grips his arm and desperately apologizes for her sudden rudeness while trying to de-escalate the situation. Arya recalls her own research about Martell's southern famine and the desperate situation facing their common people. Fenrir looks down at her, his intense gaze softening slightly as he waits for her next move. She praises the ambassador's dedication to progress, noting his genuine concern for his nation's continued refinement and growth. Arya suggests that both Martell and the Emperor share the same noble desire to protect their respective citizens. Internally, she remembers a specific line from the novel that described the Emperor's true, hidden feelings. She emphasizes that while Martell's needs are great, the Empire's own technological secrets must also be respected. The ambassador enthusiastically agrees to prioritize the Empire's needs in exchange for their vital technological assistance. A long, tense silence follows as Arya waits for the Emperor's final judgment on her bold intervention. She remains convinced that maintaining a peaceful and strong alliance with Martell is the only path forward. Clasping her hands tightly, Arya silently pleads for the Emperor to give the struggling kingdom a chance. A sudden, firm thud sounds as Fenrir finally sheathes his blade and relaxes back into his chair. The Emperor lets out a long breath, seemingly moved by Arya's sincere and well-reasoned defense of Martell. Both Arya and the ambassador look on in stunned silence as the violent tension abruptly vanishes. Fenrir agrees to the partnership, hoping it leads to Martell's prosperity, while the ambassador bows in deep gratitude. Arya allows herself a relieved smile, though the lingering stress of the confrontation still haunts her. The ambassador praises her as a truly magnificent queen who considers the welfare of even foreign citizens. He vows never to forget her kindness as Arya humbly tries to downplay her significant role. Fenrir watches her thoughtfully, realizing he could have easily forced a cruel deal if she hadn't intervened. Surrounded by symbolic flowers, the Emperor acknowledges that her gentle methods are vastly different from his own. He reflects on how long it has been since a conflict ended with such a peaceful resolution. A dark thought acknowledges that most people either shrink back from him in fear or grovel for favor. Fenrir reflects on how using pressure was always easiest, but it reminded him of a past he hated.
Arya smiles as she speaks with the visiting ambassador while the Emperor stands silently behind.
A quiet moment of reflection passes as Arya acknowledges that her exhaustion is actually satisfying. Collapsing onto her bed with a soft thud, Arya wonders if this feeling is accomplishment or relief. Staring at the ceiling, she realizes the relief comes from simply surviving another day in the palace. Hearing a sudden sound at the door, Arya turns and wonders if her maid has returned. She opens the door and is startled to find Fenrir standing there in the grand hallway. Fenrir enters the room while offering a brief apology for his sudden and unexpected evening intrusion. The Emperor strides confidently into the guest chamber, while Arya follows him with a confused expression. Sitting down with a heavy thud, Fenrir surprises her by stating that the meeting was well done. He explains that her intervention has given the Empire a solid base to negotiate in their favor.
Arya thanks him for the praise, though Fenrir questions her deep focus on Martell from the beginning.
He finds it hard to believe she supported them so much based only on short-term Queen's education. Panicking internally about the novel's plot, Arya claims she merely researched their foreign policy and current state. She insists that she had her attendants provide her with extensive research material regarding the Kingdom of Martell. Bowing deeply, Arya apologizes for interrupting the audience after she had promised not to meddle. She silently begs for him not to investigate her sudden expertise any deeper than her simple explanation. Fenrir watches her for a moment before firmly commanding her to raise her head and look up. Arya slowly looks up at the Emperor, her face pale with visible worry over his potential reaction. Fenrir bluntly states that she is still lacking in some areas as the Empire's new queen. Surrounded by symbolic roses, he admits she provided a perspective he lacks and orders her to maintain it. Blushing deeply, Arya is stunned by the rare compliment and stammeringly accepts his surprising words of encouragement. Fenrir departs for the night with a final farewell while Arya watches him leave in total disbelief. Clutching her chest, Arya wonders if the cold Emperor actually just showed her a moment of kindness. Elsewhere, a blonde woman in a yellow dress paces furiously while demanding why Arya hasn't messaged. Tension fills the dim room as the woman's angry presence unnerves the two servants standing nearby. She snarls about the lack of news from the palace, frustrated that her plans seem to be stalling. A maid suggests waiting longer, but the woman loses control and shatters a vase with a crash. The servants watch in fearful silence as the woman's rage boils over into a display of physical destruction. She reflects that if Arya is killed while using her identity, her own status would be compromised. Gripping her necklace tightly, she screams at her parents for remaining so calm during this critical time. Her father argues that the lack of bad news suggests that Arya is actually handling things well. The woman stands alone in her frustration while her family tries to maintain a sense of composure. As her father leaves, he sternly warns her not to do anything foolish to jeopardize their scheme. Gritting her teeth, the woman seethes with resentment toward her parents' cautious and dismissive attitude. A sharp crunch sounds as she steps directly onto the jagged porcelain shards of the broken flower vase. She curses Arya for the silence before turning away to walk into the shadows of the room. Pulling back the heavy curtain, the woman stares out into the dark night with a calculating gaze. Smiling maliciously, she calls Arya a useless puppet and considers taking the queen's place for herself. Days later, the Martell delegation prepares to leave as the scene returns to the Empire's throne room. The ambassador bows low and expresses that the honor of this audience was more than they deserved. Arya smiles warmly while wishing for a future of continued friendship and prosperity for both of their nations. Fenrir watches the proceedings in silence as Arya performs her royal duties with newfound grace and confidence. She reflects on her own performance, realizing that she has finally begun to look the part. Fenrir sits regally in his white military uniform while observing the departure of the foreign guests. Noticing his intense stare, Arya asks her husband if there is something on his mind or a problem. The Emperor is visibly caught off guard by her sudden attention and reacts with a look of surprise. Quickly regaining his composure, he looks away and dismissively tells her that it is absolutely nothing. The visiting ambassador smiles while observing the couple, noting that they seem to be very close. Slightly flustered, Fenrir tells him there is no need to report such unnecessary and personal details. The surrounding court officials are stunned as a collective murmur sounds over the Emperor's rare, awkward expression. Arya smiles while thinking that the Emperor is probably only evaluating her performance as the queen. A hand brushes through Arya's long blonde hair as the maid observes that the Emperor's gaze has recently softened. Arya looks surprised as Lisa notes that the Emperor's gentler expression is specifically reserved for her.
Arya recalls the Emperor's cold face when he threatened her to produce successful results for the Empire.
Arya looks sweat-dropped and skeptical, wondering if others truly consider such a terrifying expression to be gentle.
Lisa mentions rumors of an heir, while Arya frantically insists that such talk is jumping far ahead. Arya worries that news of her success might reach the Bertrands, envisioning Iris and her parents. Lisa continues to brush Arya's blonde hair while the Queen remains lost in her own deep thoughts. Arya expresses her internal fear that the real Iris will fly into a rage at the news. Lisa stops brushing and looks concerned while noting that the Queen appears to be getting quite tired. Arya looks back with a weary smile and thanks Lisa for her concern while insisting she's fine. Lisa continues to look worried as she holds the hairbrush while watching her mistress in the mirror. Arya clutches her head in pain while admitting she is actually exhausted as a throb sounds. Arya feels overwhelmed by the gaps in her knowledge and realizes she cannot afford to take a rest. A hand violently stabs a feather-filled pillow as someone screams about the meaning of the recent developments. Iris furiously stabs her bedding while screaming about Arya living as the Queen without sending any word. Feathers fly everywhere as Iris rages against Arya for thinking she can replace her as the Queen. Gritting her teeth, Iris questions why the Emperor isn't behaving as the terrifying man she had expected. A quick knock sounds before a voice announces they are coming in while addressing her as Iris. The blonde-haired woman in a red vest enters the room and gasps at the destruction of the bedding. The woman sighs in frustration as she approaches Iris, who remains hunched over on her bed. Iris looks over her shoulder with an expression of unbridled rage as her mother stands behind her. The mother commandingly orders Iris to get ready because they are departing for the Gauthier estate immediately. Iris reacts with confusion while questioning if they are truly going to visit her grandfather's place. The mother looks away sternly, ignoring her daughter's emotional outburst in favor of their upcoming plans. Iris screams at her mother while demanding to know if they have received any word from Arya. The mother explains that rumors suggest Arya is getting along well with the Emperor and cannot write. She gestures dramatically while confirming that Arya seems to be handling her royal role with unexpected success. Iris stares down with a dark and murderous expression as shadowy energy swirls around her in silence. The mother's voice rings out as she insists that Iris hurry up and get ready for departure. Close-up of the mother's face as she reminds Iris to never forget to wear her magic tool. Iris screams back in frustration while asserting that she is already well aware of the tool's importance. The mother leaves the room as Iris collapses in frustration surrounded by symbolic purple roses. A creak sounds as Iris sits on her bed before moving toward the vanity table in silence. A small clatter sounds as Iris picks up a dark jewelry box and stares at it intently. Inside the box sits a golden ring with a square blue gemstone that emits a magical glow. Iris puts on the ring as a golden magical aura begins to swirl around her body. The reflection in the mirror reveals that Iris's hair has turned dark brown while she stares coldly. Iris thinks about how Arya is merely a temporary stand-in who must be removed from her position. She grits her teeth while wishing for Arya to return her seat and disappear into a ditch. Iris insists to herself that she is the only person who is truly the golden-haired Iris. Back at the palace, a sharp scratch sounds as Arya diligently works on paperwork at her desk. Arya clutches her forehead in pain as a dull throb sounds while she struggles to stay focused. Lisa approaches with a worried expression and suggests that the Queen looks pale and should take rest. Arya offers a weak smile and thanks her maid while finally agreeing to take a short break. A soft clatter sounds as Arya places her hands on the desk and attempts to stand up. Arya gasps in confusion as the room begins to blur and distort before her failing vision. A low hum sounds as Arya loses her balance and begins to collapse while sweat beads form. Lisa reaches out in a frantic panic as she watches the Queen begin to fall toward ground. A heavy thud sounds as Arya faints onto the floor while Lisa screams for someone to help. A frantic voice cries out in panic for Her Majesty the Queen. Arya lies unconscious on the floor, surrounded by her scattered and ruined paperwork. Footsteps echo as the silver-haired Emperor strides through the palace with a serious expression. A loud bang sounds as Fenrir forcefully pushes open the large bedroom doors. A maid bows while Fenrir arrives at the bedside of the resting Queen. Fenrir sits in quiet vigil beside the sleeping Arya in the dimly lit room. The Emperor's cold gaze remains fixed on her while he watches her sleep. Arya remains deeply unconscious, her blonde hair spread across the white pillows. Narration notes that she maintained a confident facade while handling all her official duties. Arya is shown performing her royal role with grace alongside a foreign official. No signs of her hidden exhaustion were ever visible to those around her. She performed her duties perfectly, hiding the immense physical toll they took. Fenrir reflects that their limited interactions and brief words kept her struggle hidden. A look of inner conflict passes over him as he wonders why he feels worried. A heavy silence fills the chamber as Fenrir waits for her to awaken.
A soft moan escapes Arya's lips as she begins to stir from her sleep. Arya lies still while the fog of unconsciousness slowly starts to lift. Fenrir watches closely as the queen's awareness begins to return to her. Fenrir notes how cold and fragile her thin hand feels in his own. He sits in contemplative silence while maintaining a gentle hold on her hand. Arya appears peaceful in sleep just moments before her eyes fully open. Green eyes flutter open as she faintly asks who is beside her. A sudden gasp sounds as Arya sits up and discovers the Emperor at her bedside. Arya winces as a sharp throb of pain pulses through her forehead. She looks around in confusion, wondering why she is currently in her bed. Arya reflects that her right hand felt strangely warm only a moment ago. In a chibi style, Fenrir bluntly informs her that she collapsed from overwork. Arya recalls the terrifying moment the world went black as she processed the news. She looks away and apologizes for the trouble she has caused the Emperor. Fenrir dismisses her apology with a single firm refusal as he looks away. Arya looks at him in shock, surprised by his dismissive and calm reaction. She nervously gathers her courage to ask him an odd and hesitant question. Fenrir looks at her steadily and asks what it is she wants to know. Arya hesitantly asks if he was by any chance holding her hand just now. Fenrir looks away and bluntly denies having any knowledge of what she means. Arya frantically apologizes and admits she was surely mistaken about the warm feeling. Narration reflects her inner certainty that he would never do something like that.
A nervous laugh escapes as she brushes off the embarrassing thought of his kindness.
Fenrir commands her to stay in bed and rest for the remainder of the day. A soft sound of surprise as Fenrir places a hand on her shoulder. Fenrir leans in closer while continuing to hold the queen's hand. A sudden gasp sounds as the dark-haired Arya panics about being seen. Fenrir assures her they are alone while holding her wrist with a firm grip. Fenrir's blue eyes are sharp and focused as he watches her intently. The dark-haired woman blushes under his intense and steady gaze. A soft rustle sounds as Fenrir reaches out toward her dark hair. Fenrir runs his fingers through her long, dark locks in a quiet moment. Fenrir commands her to remove the magic ring only when in his presence. He observes that using the magic tool constantly must put strain on her. Fenrir states that it would be a hassle if she kept collapsing like this. Fenrir orders the palace staff to keep everyone away from the queen until morning. Fenrir walks away while telling the resting Arya to get some proper sleep. Arya realizes the Emperor must have been the one to remove her magic ring. Arya thanks the Emperor as she continues to sit upright in her bed. Fenrir informs her she will join him in his private dining room for all future meals. Arya looks stunned by the Emperor's sudden and unexpected change in his behavior toward her. Fenrir turns his head slightly and asks if his instructions are perfectly clear to her. Arya quickly confirms her understanding, her expression still showing a hint of lingering surprise. Chibi Arya panics internally while wondering why the Emperor wants to eat with her privately. Fenrir urges Arya to recover her strength, leaving her shocked by his unexpected kindness. Arya collapses back onto the bed, completely overwhelmed by the Emperor's recent gentle actions. Arya reflects that his care contradicts the cold rumor she had heard about him. Arya notes that he didn't show any sign of hating her natural black hair color. Arya wonders why her natural black hair didn't provoke any disgust from the Emperor. The scene shifts to the Gothier house in the neighboring kingdom of Elbray. Iris and her mother arrive at the grand estate as a loud creak sounds out. Iris rushes forward to greet her grandfather, Abel Gauthier, the current head of house. Abel welcomes Victoria back with a warm smile as the two family members reunite. Iris reacts with confusion as she watches her mother and grandfather interact so warmly. Victoria greets her father respectfully while Iris remains standing slightly behind her mother. Victoria hugs Abel and tells him she has missed him dearly as well. Abel assures Victoria she is always a Gauthier and welcome in his home. Iris looks on with a worried expression, questioning her mother's strange emotional behavior. Iris calls out to her grandfather, but he seems initially surprised to see her. Abel looks at Iris and asks if it is truly his granddaughter before him. Victoria confirms Iris's identity to her father as they stand in the grand hall. Magical energy swirls as Iris removes her ring to return her hair to gold. Abel tells her she is free to remove the magic tool while visiting his estate. Iris agrees and feels relieved as her hair returns to its natural blonde state. Abel smiles warmly while noting that her hair is truly a magnificent golden color.
A close-up shows Abel's hand gently touching a strand of Iris's long blonde hair.
Victoria suggests moving to a more private location to hear her father's expert opinion. Victoria tells Iris to wait there alone while she follows Abel from the room. Iris watches them leave with an expression of intense, suppressed rage and deep resentment. Iris rages about the fuss over her hair, asserting it was always naturally golden. She stares into the vanity mirror, her frustration boiling over as she adjusts her hair. Iris insists to herself that her natural golden hair represents her true, real self.
A dark vision of Arya flashes in the mirror, causing Iris to gasp aloud.
Iris screams in agony while clutching her head as a sharp throb sounds out. She stares at her blonde reflection, her face contorted with anger and brewing malice. Iris grits her teeth, her expression revealing the depth of her hatred and envy. Iris pulls at her golden hair, her dark eyes filled with a sinister, murderous intent. Abel and Victoria share tea while laughing about the success of their deceptive plans. Abel mocks the haughty empress for being forced to send a stand-in replacement. Victoria notes that using magic tools made arranging the fake queen extremely easy. A soft clatter sounds as Victoria places her teacup down on the small fable. Victoria expresses her growing frustration despite having given Arya very clear and specific instructions. Abel questions whether Arya might have actually abandoned her assigned role at the palace. Victoria listens intently to her father's suspicions while maintaining a cold and calculated expression. A flashback reveals Arya's father ordering her to report on the Emperor's hidden weaknesses. Victoria gazes downward with a cold, calculating expression as she plans her family's next move. Victoria notes that Arya will continue her role as the queen for Iris's ultimate benefit. The dark-haired Arya bows her head and confirms her absolute understanding of the given orders.
Abel expresses concern about being discovered, but Victoria trusts the magic tool to maintain the deception.
Victoria recalls that Arya's natural black hair signifies a high level of innate magical power. Victoria reflects on Iris's weak magic, which makes wearing the transformation tool for long periods difficult. Abel asks if there have been any repercussions from the imperial family, and Victoria confirms there haven't. Abel remains quiet as he processes his daughter's news regarding the lack of imperial suspicion. Victoria looks startled as Abel suggests that there is a very natural reason for the Emperor's silence. Abel recalls how the Emperor arrogantly secured trade with a nation they had been targeting. Abel's face contorts with rage as he fumes over the Emperor's perceived arrogance toward his family. A loud clatter sounds as Victoria reacts to her father's sudden and intense outburst of anger. Abel closes his eyes and takes a deep breath to calm his rising temper during their meeting. Abel mentions hearing rumors that the Emperor and the Queen are actually on very good terms. Abel stands by the window while contemplating the implications of the couple's rumored close relationship. Abel orders Victoria to return and report immediately if Arya attempts to make any outside contact. Abel smiles sinisterly, noting that the current situation remains favorable to their family's secret plans. Victoria looks up in confusion, wondering what her father meant by his cryptic and unsettling remark. Abel dismisses Victoria, telling her to return to the capital and keep the impulsive Iris under control. Victoria reluctantly agrees to her father's order to lock Iris away if she refuses to obey. Iris screams in fury while holding a torn dress, enraged by her mother's sudden order to hide. Iris rages about her grandfather's apparent lack of interest in seeing her during her stay. Iris vents her boiling frustration, feeling like a prisoner while blaming all her problems on Arya. Iris stands in the center of her bedroom, which is now littered with torn clothes and jewelry. A heavy breath sounds as Iris stares ahead, her expression becoming increasingly wild and unstable. A sinister smile spreads across Iris's face as she claims to have come up with a plan. A soft rustle sounds as Iris stands amidst the wreckage of her room, looking strangely satisfied. A sharp slide sounds as Iris forcefully pulls back the heavy curtains of her bedroom window. A loud bang sounds as Iris flings the windows open and looks out with manic glee. A close-up shows Iris's mouth curled into a wide, unsettling grin as her plan takes shape. Iris looks forward with a chillingly happy expression, telling her sister to look forward to what's coming. Back at the palace, the blonde Arya sits at a lavishly set breakfast table, looking deeply uneasy. Arya glances sideways while sweating nervously, feeling the heavy weight of the Emperor's nearby presence. Arya panics internally while wondering why she is suddenly having a private breakfast with the Emperor. Chibi Arya's head spins in confusion as she tries to process the Emperor's sudden, strange behavior. The two sit in silence at opposite ends of a long table in the grand dining hall. Arya recalls the Emperor's earlier command that all her future meals would be taken with him. Arya reflects on the sheer impossibility of the situation as she eats breakfast with the Emperor. Arya looks down at her food with a strained expression, unable to relax under his steady gaze. A close-up shows Arya's wide green eyes as she nervously steals a glance at the Emperor. Arya feels like the meal is a form of torture because the Emperor's expression is completely unreadable. Chibi Arya looks exhausted and admits to herself that she is too nervous to even swallow. A clatter sounds as Fenrir notices her lack of appetite and asks if she is still unwell. A close-up shows the untouched plate of eggs, sausages, and vegetables sitting before the nervous queen. Arya quickly tries to reassure him that her health is perfectly fine, her expression appearing quite flustered. Fenrir leans forward and asks if the food simply doesn't suit her taste, his gaze remaining sharp. Arya frantically denies his suggestion, her hands raised in a gesture of nervous and hurried protest.
Fenrir dismisses her protests and orders the maid to bring her a different dish to eat.
Arya tries to stop him, insisting the meal is fine and there's no need for extra trouble. Chibi Fenrir stares intensely at the sweating and smiling Arya as she tries to maintain her composure. Fenrir exhales a soft breath while looking down, his expression hidden in the shadows.
Fenrir promises to provide easier meals next time, his steady gaze fixed on the queen.
Fenrir invites Arya to share her preferences with the maids, and she tentatively agrees. Arya watches the Emperor with wide eyes, wondering if he is truly showing concern. She reflects on his kindness today versus his behavior during her recent bout of illness. A quiet moment of realization passes as Arya feels thrown by the Emperor's sudden warmth. Arya feels the morning's heavy tension finally crashing down on her as she clutches her forehead. Arya turns in surprise as Fenrir's voice calls her name from the grand doorway. A sharp click sounds as Arya pulls the door open to find the Emperor waiting.
Arya gasps in shock, her eyes wide with surprise at seeing the Emperor standing there.
Arya sits nervously across from Fenrir, her hand raised to her chest in a flustered gesture.
Arya asks about the refreshments on the table, which are bathed in a warm, shimmering light. Fenrir identifies the tray as sweets, prompting Arya to offer a polite and quiet thanks.
Arya decides to try one of the colorful macarons, reaching out with a delicate hand.
Arya smiles happily as the sugar re-energizes her tired body, hearts floating around her. Fenrir maintains a calm and steady expression as he watches the queen enjoy the treats.
Arya asks the Emperor if he would like to join her in eating the sweets.
Fenrir declines the sweets, stating they were for her while he sips his tea.
Fenrir suggests she remove her ring for comfort, and Arya follows his instruction immediately.
Magic swirls as Arya removes the ring, allowing her long hair to return to black. Chibi Arya finds the Emperor's sudden change in personality to be almost like total whiplash. Arya considers asking him about this shift in his behavior while playing with her hair.
Arya looks up at the Emperor with a hesitant expression, her true hair color fully restored. Fenrir notes that clearing the room allowed her to be herself without risk of collapsing.
Chibi Arya agrees with his assessment but remains visibly confused by his continued thoughtfulness.
Arya asks if he finds black hair disgusting, causing Fenrir to react with sudden intensity.
A heavy silence fills the dark room as Arya realizes she might have misspoken.
Arya frantically apologizes for her rudeness while Fenrir sits in a tense and brooding silence.
Fenrir reveals his deep-seated hatred for the custom of despising black hair, appearing pained. Arya looks at him with an expression of shock and bewilderment at his blunt admission. A close-up of Fenrir's mouth shows him remaining silent for a moment before continuing. Fenrir looks downward while explaining that his own mother possessed natural black hair. A flashback shows Fenrir was raised as heir because the queen could not bear children. People initially showed his mother respect because she was the mother of the future king. Fenrir recalls the two-faced nature of the nobles who insulted his mother behind her back. Young Fenrir stands alone and isolated, surrounded by the looming shadows of a hostile court. Arya looks at the Emperor with newfound understanding, her eyes filled with sympathy. She realizes his cold and ruthless persona was built to protect him from such betrayal. Fenrir reflects on the previous king's indifference, leading Arya to ask about his mother's love.
Fenrir expresses his doubt that his father ever truly felt love for anyone at all.
Young Fenrir sits alone in a dark room with his toys, feeling completely isolated. A soft rustle sounds as Arya grips her skirts tightly, feeling the weight of his loneliness. Fenrir abruptly ends the conversation, dismissing his past experiences as a completely pointless story. Fenrir stares intensely at Arya while stating that his lack of love extends to her. Arya reflects on her own experiences of being blamed for things beyond her control. She wonders if the Emperor has been enduring similar suffering throughout his entire life. Fenrir stands up from his chair and announces that it is time for him to go. A close-up shows a slight, almost imperceptible smirk on Fenrir's face as he turns away. Arya looks overwhelmed, her hand pressed to her head as she tries to process everything. Arya watches the closed doors of the room while reflecting on the Emperor's sudden departure. In his office, a butler informs the white-haired Fenrir that it is time for the annual kingdom visit. The butler asks if the queen will be joining him while the Emperor remains deeply contemplative. Arya is seen sleeping peacefully in her bed as the soft morning light enters the room. Fenrir decides he will travel to the Vagni kingdom completely alone during this upcoming yearly visit. At breakfast, Arya asks the Emperor if he is planning a visit to the Vagni kingdom. Fenrir confirms his departure in 3 weeks, leading Arya to wonder why she isn't accompanying him. Fenrir explains that it is merely a customary visit and he can handle the official duties alone.
Arya reflects on the Emperor's rare absence from the palace, while her expression remains quite troubled.
A close-up shows Fenrir's sharp blue eyes as he carefully observes the queen across the table.
Fenrir promises to provide specific instructions to ensure she is not inconvenienced during his time away.
Fenrir sips his tea while suggesting she dismiss her attendants if she wishes to be alone. Arya notices a significant and surprising shift in the Emperor's treatment toward her now. A sharp clacking sounds as the blonde Iris walks through the dark and silent palace hallway. Iris demands to know how much longer her parents plan to keep her locked up. Iris fumes over being restricted to the house even though she can finally leave her bedroom. Iris stops in her tracks as she hears muffled voices coming from behind a closed door. A voice mentions the Emperor's upcoming visit to the Vagni kingdom through the heavy door.
Iris reacts with wide-eyed shock as she continues eavesdropping on the conversation from the doorway.
Abel confirms that Fenrir will go alone this year, and Victoria agrees with a quiet nod.
Iris peeks through the door with a sinister grin, realizing Arya will be alone and unprotected.
A vision of the black-haired Arya appears surrounded by dark and thorny roses.
Iris vows to punish the defective stand-in while a malicious expression spreads across her face. A quick tapping sounds as a hand knocks firmly on the wood of a bedroom door.
A sharp click sounds as Abel pushes the door open and looks inside with surprise.
The blonde Arya sits quietly in a chair while focused on reading a small green book. Arya offers a polite greeting to her father as he enters her room to see her. Arya places her hand on the book and mentions that she has already finished reading it. Abel offers to send up more books, but Arya asks for other ways to pass time.
Abel suggests dresses or jewelry, but Arya reveals she wants something else besides those standard gifts.
Arya asks for magic tools designed for children along with her requests for jewelry and dresses. Abel looks visibly taken aback by his daughter's unusual request for magical items meant for children. Arya smiles sweetly at her father while asking for his permission to have the magical tools. Abel agrees to summon a merchant, assuming that simple magic tools for children are completely harmless. Arya beams with a wide and happy smile while telling her father that she loves him. Arya's expression turns chillingly cold as she repeats her declaration of love after Abel leaves. Arya wonders why there is cake again today while sitting on the couch with the Emperor. Arya asks if the Emperor is attempting to tame her with food like a pet animal. Arya wonders if she is something to be killed or broken, while Fenrir scolds her thoughts. Fenrir smiles slightly and tells her that she never ceases to entertain him while acting as Arya. Chibi Arya wonders if he views her merely as a pet while she holds a fish. Fenrir sips his tea while reflecting on how she used to be just like a doll. Fenrir looks at Arya and wonders if it is possible for a person to change significantly. A soft steam rises as Arya looks up at the Emperor with a look of surprise. Arya asks if something is wrong, but Fenrir dismisses her concern by saying it is nothing. Fenrir holds out a decorative white box and tells Arya to hold out her hand. Fenrir gently places the small and ornate white gift box into Arya's open and waiting palms. Arya looks down at the gift box with a surprised and curious expression on her face. Fenrir tells Arya to open the gift, and she tentatively prepares to see what is inside. A sharp click sounds as Arya opens the ornate box and reacts with sudden, wide-eyed shock. Arya's face lights up with a joyful and wide smile as she sees the gift's contents. A dazzling pink gemstone rests inside the intricate golden casing of the small ornate brooch. Arya looks at the jewelry in shock as Fenrir sits calmly beside her on the sofa. Arya realizes it is a protective charm, while Fenrir watches her with a slightly annoyed expression. A radiant and joyful smile spreads across Arya's face as she holds the unexpected gift. Fenrir tells her to try putting it on, and Arya immediately agrees to his suggestion. A sharp click sounds as Arya carefully pins the pink gemstone brooch to her white collar. Fenrir maintains a steady and observant gaze as he watches the girl finish pinning the jewelry. Arya beams with happiness, her hands over her heart as she admires her new accessory. Fenrir offers a rare and subtle smirk, appearing pleased by the young woman's genuine reaction.
Arya's eyes widen and her cheeks flush red as Fenrir suddenly moves in very close.
Chibi versions of the pair argue briefly as Arya insists that nothing at all is wrong. Arya touches the brooch while lost in a moment of deep and silent contemplation. A dark vision of blood splashing over a throat highlights the potential danger she faces. A close-up shows Arya's wide pink eyes reflecting her internal panic and sudden realization. Arya is visibly flustered as the silver-haired Emperor leans his face dangerously close to hers. Arya feels overwhelmed by his proximity as beautiful flowers bloom in the background of her thoughts. The two sit face-to-face in the quiet room as an intense and heavy silence grows. A hand reaches out with delicate fingers moving toward Arya's chin with a steady purpose. Fenrir gently tilts Arya's head upward, his fingers grazing her chin in a very intimate gesture. Arya remains frozen and speechless, her mouth slightly agape as the Emperor towers over her. Arya stares up at Fenrir with a look of pure bewilderment at his sudden physical contact. Fenrir tells her to get some rest as he prepares to head back for the mate. Arya bids the Emperor a polite goodnight as he walks away toward the large double doors. Arya stands alone in the room, reflecting on how startled she was by his sudden touch.
Arya gazes out the window at the night sky, reflecting on receiving her first ever gift.
Memories of her previous life surface as she recalls losing both parents in a tragic accident. A younger version of herself cuts her long black hair while sitting in the dark shadows. She reflects on how she was passed around from one disinterested relative to another for years. Funeral portraits of her parents stand among flowers while relatives argue about her unwanted presence. The young girl clutches a plush toy while relatives complain about the burden of her care.
Throughout her school years, the lonely girl sought refuge from her harsh reality inside fantasy novels.
Incredible fantasy stories allowed her to escape her miserable life and find a temporary peace. Turning the pages of her books made the brown-eyed girl feel like she finally belonged somewhere. Even as a simple observer, those magical stories provided her with a much-needed sense of place. Arya muses that she and the original Arya were quite similar despite their very different worlds. A close-up shows Arya touching her own face as she dives deeper into these painful memories. The young girl stands isolated in a circle of adults who show her nothing but hostility. A small, lonely child sits on a stool and hugs her stuffed animal in the dark. An aunt acts proud in public, boasting about taking in her poor orphan niece for show.
The relative brags to neighbors while the miserable girl stands nearby with her heavy school bag.
In private, the harsh relative demands that she perform chores in exchange for being fed daily. Arya remembers the cruelty of having her hair cut by a mocking relative in the past. She wonders if they were so alike that it led to her becoming Arya herself now.
Arya and her past self stand face to face, their hands touching as their shared trauma connects them.
A sudden slap sounds as Arya hits her own cheeks to snap herself out of it.
Arya clenches her fists with determination, resolving that she must live her new life as Arya.
Arya looks to the side, noting that she is no longer treated as a mere nuisance. A flashback shows the original blonde Arya being bothered by a portly and lecherous nobleman. Arya wonders if she is finally doing something useful in her role as the new empress. Arya clenches her fist, hoping the Emperor now views her life as having some actual worth. Fenrir wears a dark robe as the black-haired Arya nervously hopes he won't point his sword again.
Arya appears visibly distressed while several drops of nervous sweat roll down her pale face.
A memory surfaces of Fenrir gently lifting the blonde Arya's chin among white garden roses.
Fenrir holds out a decorative white jewelry box while maintaining a serious and focused expression.
The black-haired Arya smiles warmly while wearing a large pink gemstone brooch on her collar.
A grand room contains a collection of luxury gifts, including a white stuffed bunny and scales. The blonde Arya wonders which of the many expensive items she should pick for herself. Abel pats his daughter's head and tells her to pick whatever she likes before he leaves. Abel walks out of the large bedroom doors while Arya watches him leave the room. A dark shadow falls over Arya's face as a sinister smile spreads across her lips. Arya asks the merchant for the most expensive item and promises a reward for his help.
Arya whispers to the merchant to keep their deal a secret in exchange for extra favors.
The older merchant offers a sly smirk while signaling his agreement to the girl's secret plan.
Arya leans in close to whisper her specific and hidden requests to the merchant in secret.
A few days pass before the merchant returns to present a small and ornate black box. The merchant holds the jewelry box out while asking the lady for her thoughts on it. A sharp click sounds as Arya opens the ornate box and looks inside with a smirk. A close-up focuses on Arya's sharp green eye as she looks at the item she requested. Arya smiles sweetly while thanking the merchant and telling him she will call on him again. Arya watches from an upper-floor window as the merchant departs from the palace grounds. Arya stands partially hidden by pink curtains while smiling to herself about her successful secret deal. Arya clutches the box to her chest and thinks that everything is finally ready for her. The black-haired Arya sips her tea while sitting across from the Emperor during their morning meal. At the breakfast table, Arya asks if there is a garden behind the royal palace.
Lisa the maid smiles warmly as she confirms the existence of the beautiful palace back garden.
Bright yellow and pink petals drift through the clear blue sky above the palace grounds. A butterfly lands on a cluster of yellow flowers while Lisa mentions the garden's great beauty. Lisa closes her eyes and smiles while expressing confidence that the garden will please the queen. Arya gazes out the window and decides that today's nice weather is perfect for a walk. Lisa beams with a wide and happy smile after hearing the queen's positive response. Lisa suggests that the Emperor should personally show Arya around the gardens during their morning break. Arya and Fenrir both react with sudden shock at the maid's unexpected proposal for a tour. An aerial view shows the vast and intricate palace gardens filled with green hedges and fountains. A splash sounds as water cascades down the tiers of a large and ornate stone fountain. A white garden archway is covered in lush greenery and clusters of blooming pink roses. Arya stands in the sunlit garden and looks around with an expression of pure surprise. A narrator asks if this is the first time she is seeing the garden in person. Fenrir and Arya walk together through the garden while the Emperor looks ahead with a calm face. Arya smiles and explains she has only seen the garden from inside the palace before now. Fenrir acknowledges her words and suggests they continue their walk further into the garden area. The pair walks down a stone staircase surrounded by large bushes of white garden roses. Fenrir stops and offers his hand to Arya while looking at her with a steady gaze. Chibi versions of the pair show Arya looking completely bewildered by Fenrir's sudden gentlemanly gesture.
Arya stares at his hand with a blush while Fenrir waits for her to take it.
Fenrir asks what happened to all the manners she was taught as he continues to wait. Arya reacts with surprise as Fenrir reaches out to gently take hold of her hand. Fenrir leads Arya by the hand while she silently asks him to take care of her. Arya looks at their joined hands with a look of surprise while they continue their walk. A close-up of Arya's wide green eyes shows her sudden realization as she looks at Fenrir. Arya reflects on how her conversation with Lisa led to this unexpected walk with the Emperor. Arya asks Lisa for advice on how to get to know someone better. Lisa asks if the person in question is the Emperor. Arya denies that there is anything strange about her curiosity. Arya reflects on how the Emperor has become much kinder lately. Arya wonders about his favorite things while Lisa finds her reaction adorable. Lisa suggests Arya speak to him directly and offers her support. Arya remains curious as the scene shifts to the garden. The pair sits together in the palace garden under a sunlit trellis. Arya reflects on the surprise of the maid's suggestion to the Emperor. A close-up highlights Arya's striking green eyes and her thoughtful expression. Fenrir notices the jewelry he gave her and maintains a focused gaze. Fenrir comments on her wearing the gift, and Arya confirms she is. A hand brushes against the ornate pink gemstone brooch pinned to her collar. Arya smiles warmly, explaining that receiving the gift made her very happy. Fenrir's blue eye is shown in a tight close-up as he observes her. Fenrir questions if he actually enjoys seeing how happy she is.
Arya hesitates before asking the Emperor if she can inquire about something.
Fenrir looks at her calmly and asks what she wants to know. Arya asks the Emperor what kind of things he specifically likes. Fenrir remains silent, wondering if the sudden question is some kind of trap. Arya quickly clarifies that she means simple things like his favorite color. Fenrir admits that he has a preference for cool colors. A chibi Arya takes notes, associating cool colors with the blue of his eyes. A flurry of feathers falls from the sky as a bird flies nearby.
A small, plump white bird lands gracefully on the garden table.
Arya watches with fascination as the little bird approaches her. Arya gently strokes the bird's head and remarks on how cute it is. Arya beams with joy while holding the bird, unaware of Fenrir's gaze. Arya notices Fenrir looking at her and asks what is wrong. Fenrir notes that she is making an interesting face at the bird. A chibi Arya is confused by his comment regarding her reaction. The narrative continues to reflect on her growing feelings for the Emperor. Arya looks at Fenrir with a mix of curiosity and soft realization. Narrative text notes that her previous nervousness might have hidden the truth. Arya thinks about how beautiful the Emperor looks in the golden light. The sun begins to set as the small bird flies away from them. Fenrir maintains a stoic and steady expression as the light fades. Arya remains silent, clearly lost in her own private box. Fenrir suggests they head back as the sun begins to set. Arya silently wishes that they could have talked for just a bit longer. Fenrir begins to walk away, leaving Arya standing in the garden. Arya asks if he would join her for another garden walk soon. Fenrir looks back at her with a calm and unreadable expression. Fenrir tells her he might agree if he feels like doing so. A subtle and rare smirk appears on the silver-haired Emperor's face. Time passes, leading to the day of the Emperor's departure.
Arya and Lisa arrive as the Emperor prepares the horses for Cavill.
Arya asks about the small escort, and Fenrir explains his preference for freedom. Arya smiles and reflects on how that choice is very typical of him.
Fenrir suddenly moves behind Arya, startling her as the scene concludes.
A hand rests on Arya's shoulder near the ornate pink gemstone brooch. Fenrir leans in close to warn Arya that trouble could arise during his absence. Fenrir commands her to remain vigilant, and Arya gratefully acknowledges his concern for her safety. She dismisses potential threats from the Bertrand family as unlikely to become anything serious. Fenrir reminds her how she unexpectedly arrived at the palace, forcing Arya to agree. Fenrir observes with a calm, steady gaze before preparing for his long journey. Arya watches the Emperor's back as he walks toward his waiting horse. Fenrir offers a rare, fleeting smirk as he glances back one final time. Arya is momentarily stunned, realizing the Emperor has completely seen through her true intentions. Mounted on his horse, Fenrir instructs Arya to contact him immediately if anything happens. A swift movement sounds as Fenrir expertly mounts his horse to depart the grounds. Arya and Lisa wave goodbye as the Emperor rides away from the palace gates. The pair walks through the grand, quiet halls as the palace feels suddenly empty.
Arya reflects on how the vast palace seems much lonelier without the Emperor's presence.
Her footsteps echo through the corridor as she navigates the quiet palace on her own. A small, relieved smile plays on Arya's lips now that she is finally alone.
Arya expresses joy at having some free time without the constant need to stay tense.
Surrounded by blooming roses, Arya wonders how she should spend her newfound freedom.
Lisa asks if she enjoyed the gardens, prompting Arya to recall their previous walk.
Arya enthusiastically confirms her love for the garden, her face glowing with pure happiness.
A thoughtful look crosses Arya's face as she considers her growing feelings for the Emperor.
Her fingers graze the brooch he gave her while she stands amidst white flowers. A sudden, quick thump sounds in her chest as Arya feels a rush of intense emotion. Startled by her own reaction, Arya turns away quickly to hide her blushing face.
Arya asks Lisa for suggestions on what kind of gift would suit the Emperor.
Lisa ponders the question carefully, trying to think of the perfect item for him.
Lisa suggests that any gift from Arya would please him, which Arya finds quite frustrating. Lisa advises choosing something simple over flashy, and Arya agrees to follow that direction.
Arya considers practical items like a new quill or glassware that he could use daily.
Remembering his preference for cool colors, Arya decides to embroider a blue handkerchief for him.
Lisa notes their growing harmony, though Arya recalls how terrifying the Emperor first seemed. A memory surfaces of Fenrir's cold, sharp gaze when they first met in the palace. Arya's image is reflected in Fenrir's cold blue eye as the memory fades.
Narrative text highlights that Arya can now sense a hidden gentleness in his character.
Arya smiles warmly, realizing how much their relationship has changed since her arrival.
A flashback shows the Emperor holding her hand after she collapsed from exhaustion. Fenrir sternly orders her to only remove her ring while in his presence.
The brown-haired Arya looks up at him with wide, confused eyes at his demand.
She realizes that his harsh words were actually a way of showing his concern.
Arya stands alone on the palace balcony, looking out over the vast garden grounds. Gripping the railing, she remembers her determination to prove her worth to stay alive. Flashbacks depict her past struggles to win the cold Emperor's favor and secure her life. A cheerful chirp sounds as a small white bird lands on the balcony railing. Arya smiles kindly as the little bird perches trustingly on her extended hand. Arya reflects on how the Emperor has finally begun to recognize her hard work. A quiet smile remains on her face as she continues to watch the bird. She recalls the moment he first called her by name, acknowledging her true self. Arya realizes that the Emperor is now treating her as Arya rather than a nuisance.
She feels a deep sense of shared time and connection with the Emperor at last.
The little white bird takes flight into the clear blue sky, signaling a new beginning.
Arya touches her hair thoughtfully, realizing the Emperor has finally departed, and she is alone.
Arya reflects on being alone, noting that she initially expected it to be quite relaxing. Arya determines to prepare a gift for the Emperor before his return to the palace. Arya walks alone through the grand, silent halls, her long light blue dress trailing behind. The scene shifts to the Emperor's travel party taking a rest by a forest stream. A loud crack sounds as Fenrir attempts to mount his horse, causing his stirrup to break.
Fenrir reacts with shock as the leather strap of his stirrup suddenly snaps under his weight.
An escort rushes toward the Emperor, asking if he is hurt after the equipment failure.
The brown-haired escort examines the broken strap, apologizing that the equipment was not properly checked.
Fenrir stares at the broken leather in disbelief, noting it should not have snapped like this.
Dark energy swirls as text notes that such an equipment failure has never happened before.
A close-up shows the jagged, unnatural break in the leather strap, suggesting it was sabotaged. A hooded figure watches through a dark window while activating a glowing red magical device.
The hooded figure enters the palace, surrounded by swirling wisps of ominous and dark magic.
A sudden gust sounds as the cloaked person moves swiftly through the quiet, moonlit palace. The hooded woman pants heavily, the strain of using magic visible on her sweating face.
An escort greets the lady, noting her arrival and commenting on how hard she works people.
A clink sounds as the woman pays the man a pouch of coins for his assistance. The man stops at a distance, warning that getting any closer would raise too much suspicion.
The man asks the hooded woman how exactly she plans to sneak into the palace grounds.
The hooded woman reveals her face and claims that Arya is merely a stand-in for her. The man gasps as dark magic swirls around the woman's feet while she begins her transformation.
Now inside, the woman in the black cloak breathes a sigh of relief while navigating.
A light ping sounds as she complains about how exhausting it is to move using magic. The text emphasizes her frustration at the physical toll and limited range of the magical device.
A rustle sounds as she discards the cloak, revealing a blonde woman in an ornate green dress.
A series of clicks sounds as the woman in the green dress walks confidently through the corridor. A maid is startled by a sudden sound in the hallway, looking back in total confusion. The blonde woman in green addresses the maid, who gasps in shock at her sudden presence.
The freckled maid bows deeply and asks for Her Highness's orders with a nervous expression.
A chuckle sounds as the woman notes how much she likes being called the queen. The blonde woman in green smirks, admitting she isn't used to seeing the palace at night. A rustle sounds as the woman in green follows the maid, who leads her through the halls. The woman in green smiles to herself, noting that no one has noticed the clever deception. The maid instructs the visitor to turn right, explaining she cannot accompany her any further. A swoosh sounds as the blonde woman thanks the maid and dismisses her from her presence. A snicker sounds as the woman remarks on how disappointingly easy it was to sneak in.
Narrative text emphasizes the woman's belief that she is the true mistress of the palace.
A series of knocks sounds on the ornate white and gold doors of Arya's chambers. Arya looks up from her reading in surprise as someone interrupts her quiet evening. Arya wonders who could be visiting at such a late hour, guessing it might be Lisa. A click sounds as Arya reaches out to turn the golden door handle and open it.
A sudden gasp sounds as Arya is startled by the green-eyed woman entering her private room.
A thud sounds as the blonde woman in green slams the door shut behind her.
Arya gasps as the mysterious visitor stands before her with a smug and confident expression.
Arya cowers on the floor as the woman in the green dress looms over her menacingly. The blonde visitor smiles coldly, calling Arya her sister and suggesting she address her as the queen.
Arya remains frozen on the floor in total silence, staring up at her sister in shock.
A swish sounds as the visitor leans in close, mocking Arya for her lack of words.
The sister asks if Arya is enjoying her life as an imposter without sending any word home. Iris pins Arya down, demanding to know how long she plans to keep that hair color as a sharp, sudden tug sounds.
A metallic clatter sounds as the golden ring falls onto the ornate, patterned red carpet.
Arya lies on the floor in shock as her hair transforms back to its natural black.
A sharp click sounds as Iris smirks coldly, her green eyes filled with a cruel and triumphant satisfaction. Iris pins Arya down, claiming she is the only golden-haired Iris while demanding that her sister hurry up. Iris shouts that Arya has no right to be happy and looks best wallowing in misery with her black hair.
A memory surfaces as Arya recalls how miserable she felt while scrubbing floors in her past life as a servant.
The memory continues, showing Arya lying exhausted on the ground after being pushed past her limit.
Arya decides that she has suffered more than enough already, her mind finally beginning to push back against the abuse.
Determination flares in Arya's pink eyes as she prepares to finally confront her cruel sister. Arya asserts that even with her natural black hair, she still possesses the absolute right to find happiness for herself.
Arya pushes Iris back and shouts her name, demanding to be released as a sudden, sharp shove sounds between them. Arya reaches out across the floor, desperate to retrieve the precious ring given by the Emperor.
A tense, sharp creak sounds as Arya's gaze hardens with a newfound and fierce resolve.
Furious that Arya used her name, Iris pulls her hair and demands respect, while a pained, audible gasp sounds.
A heavy thud sounds as Iris ruthlessly pins Arya's head, attempting to force her into submission. A mocking laugh sounds as Iris finds it ridiculous that Arya actually started believing she was the true queen. Iris continues to insult Arya's disgusting black hair while pulling it violently as a harsh, grating scrape sounds.
Startled by Arya's intense gaze, Iris demands to know what the sudden, defiant look in her sister's eyes means.
Arya begins to speak with a low, steady voice, demanding that Iris answer her question and tell her the truth.
Looking directly at her sister, Arya asks if the only reason she is hated so intensely is because of her hair.
Iris is momentarily stunned into silence, her face contorted with shock at being confronted so directly. Arya questions if things would be different if her hair weren't black, highlighting the sheer irrationality of her sister's hatred.
Iris shouts that she would still hate Arya regardless and calls her a stand-in doll as a sharp yank sounds.
Iris mocks Arya's quiet voice, leaning in close to emphasize how little she cares for her sister's desperate words. With a sudden, explosive surge of power, Arya declares she is no longer a doll as a loud, magical roar sounds.
A sudden, blinding flash sounds as a burst of light erupts from Arya, leaving a shocked Iris reeling in terror.